Okay, my friends, I have spent about 6 years uploading about 200 videos about Bernadette, and these will be my last few because I need to move on with my life. And I am encouraging you to watch these first by way of introduction. These ideas are pearls of wisdom, and most of you are not swine. Whoever wrote "Cast not your pearls before swine" was obviously not thinking of uploading YouTube videos. He was talking about the kind of sustained contact with someone required to discern if they are swine or not. Exactly what we don't have. If we did, I would make the course of study you are about to embark upon last at least 2 years. I have spent more than 30 years wrestling with the ideas of Bernadette Roberts. Every single time I read one of her books, I find many new insights I had previously overlooked. Her stuff is just that densely rich with spiritual fertility. So embark you will. You will find yourself watching some of these videos many times. She would say, don't spend 30 years listening to them. Certainly, if it is at the expense of charity or service, I would agree. She would certainly counsel you not to make her your guru, and I would certainly agree. But if you are able to listen to her occasionally and serve your neighbor at the same time, I think you could listen to her and read her books for 30 years with great spiritual interest. Her speaking voice was neither sonorous nor mellifluous, yet her writer's voice is unmistakably sincere and surprisingly wise. Her ideas and writings and videos evolved over more than 30 years. Therefore, I think it is important to familiarize yourself with her original and hard to understand ideas in a particular order. And first, before that, I think it is important to familiarize yourself with her as a person. Otherwise, you might dive into her later writings and, quite rightly, wonder where she had gotten all this stuff. Her terminology is actually new but looks deceptively familiar. This takes some time to get used to. Eventually, it will all make perfect sense, but it will take some time. Generally, I recommend you spend a year watching all the videos on this channel, especially The Journey Through Self and The Essence of Christian Mysticism. These two videos were made decades apart and thus exemplify some of the evolution of the directions of the thoughts that brain had. Then I recommend you spend a year reading slowly all her books. I recommend you read them in this order. I don't have a table. Her autobiography, then The Path to No Self, then The Experience of No Self, then Essays on the Christian Contemplative Journey, then What is Self, a exploration of the spiritual journey in terms of consciousness, which I don't have a copy of right now because I gave it to my stepdad, and then finally this, The Real Christ. Then I recommend you briefly read all of my books. After 2 years of watching all her videos and reading all her books, you should be able to benefit from them tremendously, I hope. Don't get stuck in this beautiful world. Flush it down the toilet, use it, incorporate it, share it, invest in people, whatever. The video order that I'm recommending after you go to my YouTube page is that you have the playlists, and I recommend you first watch the playlist called Bernadette Roberts, which are videos uploaded by other people and are excellent. Then I recommend you watch the playlist called Biography of a Mystic and Contemplative. Third, watch the playlist called Unitive State. Then watch the playlist called No Self Event. Fifth, watch the playlist called Theological Gems, Sans Music. These have a lot of excerpts from the 9-hour long talk called The Essence of Christian Mysticism. And then, If you want to put on a playlist while you're washing dishes or jogging or driving, you can listen to the playlist called Bernadette with Music. Finally, you will probably want to watch the playlist called The Real Christ Explored, where I basically just read with a little bit of commentary the last half of that last book I just showed you. I don't recommend watching or listening to more than 20 or 30 minutes a day. If you don't understand something or disagree with something, congratulations. You will get to examine your beliefs, and as Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living, and know thyself. You will see in the first few biographical videos the attitude she had toward the spiritual life from very early on. It was a kind of no-nonsense, test everything, question everything, trust no one kind of spiritual attitude, and that love of God is a will to God. These two things got her as far as one can go in this life, and then she lived another 40 years to tell us about it. Incidentally, if Jesus lived in the unitive state for between 30 to 33 years, so did she, from between the ages 17 to 47. Please don't misquote me by saying that I ever said, she said Jesus, that I ever said she was the second coming of Jesus. She obviously was not, and would have been the very first to insist so. Neither should you misunderstand me if I say she was the second coming of Christ to mean Jesus. But if you understand by the term Christ the complete oneness of God and humanity, with no self to get in the way, then that is what we had after the crucifixion, and Bernadette claimed to also have lived in the resurrected condition. Maybe Jesus knew that God works with humanity in organic ways. If someone could walk on this earth for 30 years, one with God, without anyone batting an eye about it once, then it could definitely happen again, and therefore eventually probably would. This in no way takes away from his uniqueness among all men, which Bernadette held existed in three specific ways. If Jews and Muslims can just get on board with these, then the children of Abraham and Elijah can finally be one at last. They are, first, once removed; second, experience versus reality; and third, reverse process. A little more on this later. You will find out what these mean in greater depth in year 2 while you're reading the books, if you stick with this Get Enlightened in a few years, even though I am not after 30 years program, when you read how this is dealt with in depth in the final part of her book, What is Self? The Spiritual Journey in Terms of Consciousness. By the way, I am asking you to read this book immediately before her final masterpiece called The Real Christ. I want you to remember that it was written before and that she didn't change her mind about any of it before writing The Real Christ. Or try and find proof in the texts that indicate she did. Ask yourself, could she have written The Real Christ after What is Self without changing her mind? They somewhat paint Jesus in a different light or look at him from different perspectives. I would say that in What is Self, she considers more the divine side of Christ, whereas in The Real Christ, she considers more the human side of Christ. As to her Christology and its orthodoxy, you decide for yourself. As you do, remember, she claimed that God revealed to her that no self is more orthodox than the orthodox. Here's just some essays that I've written over the past couple of months. A Day of Personal Reckoning. An Advaita Vedanta scholar once said, "It would be impossible to have a religion without some belief in a personal afterlife." I would almost agree. It seems like one of the main functions of many religions is to assuage the nagging dread that most humans carry regarding their own death. What Bernadette was saying was that fear of death is a lack of trust in God. And she was saying that the self dies forever. And she said that whatever remains participates in the being and wisdom